Dear viewer, I invite you to imagine the following. It is 1 in the morning, a dreary November night. Rain taps on the window and you're standing in a dimly lit study, looking at a young man who's looking on a table where something like a corpse seems to lie. But suddenly this being opens its yellow eyes. It starts to breathe and it starts to move. When this happens to Victor Frankenstein, he cannot believe his eyes. Did he really conquer death and succeeded in reanimating a dead body? He did, in Mary Shelley's novel Frankenstein, or the Modern Prometheus, which I've got with me here. We want to explore the theme of resurrection in this novel today, as today is Easter. But other than the Easter celebration in Christianity, where the resurrection of Jesus is an act of divine love, in Frankenstein it is rather a narcissistic act of a young scientist who wants to play God and conquer death itself. So if you're ready, let's get started and explore the theme of resurrection in the novel with me. So the novel starts with a few letters written by the privateer Robert Walton, a man who goes on an expedition to the Arctic to explore the region and follow his scientific pursuits. And there he meets young Victor Frankenstein, who is completely lost and ill and has been looking for the monster that he created. And he begins to tell Robert Walton his story, and there the narrative starts. Victor Frankenstein tells about his childhood and youth. He was brought up in Geneva and then he went for his studies to Ingolstadt in Germany, where he learned a lot about natural sciences, and this is also what he was very fascinated by all the time. But what he was most fascinated by was anatomy and the way how life itself really worked. As he was studying the natural sciences more and more, he got an idea in his head. He wanted to become capable of bestowing animation upon lifeless matter. So that is something that is very conscious to him. It is not just this fascination with the possibility that it would be possible to reanimate something dead, but it is also this desire to conquer and control life itself. This is very vivid in the following quote. I will read to you right now. He says, "No one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appear to me ideal bounds which I should first break through and pour a torrent of light into our dark world. A new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. And as he says here, a new species would bless me as its creator and source. And many excellent natures would owe their being to me." So here you have a very clear reference to the Bible. So here you see a quite close reference to the Bible, especially to the Old Testament and the book Genesis. And this hybris, this idea of being God yourself and creating life from your own hands. And this idea gets into Victor Frankenstein's head, and he is so fascinated by it that he cannot let go of it. And Shelley obviously critiques this impulse here already as a form of denial and hybris, and suggests already that trying to defy death without understanding its place in life will lead to destruction. Still, although Victor Frankenstein himself already assumes that it might not be the best idea and is also a little bit horrified by the idea, he follows his pursuit. And he also does not shy away from working with dead body parts. As he says, he has never been drawn to the supernatural because his father has always torn him away from that and protected him in a way, and therefore he is not afraid of ghosts, of corpses, of anything supernatural. He can easily walk through a graveyard and even work with the corpses in the laboratories. And therefore he can collect a lot of material to work with and to try his experiments out. He says, I collected bones from charnel houses and disturbed with profane fingers the tremendous secrets of the human frame. In a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, and separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase, I kept my workshop of filthy creation. My eyeballs were starting from their sockets in attending to the details of my employment. The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials, and often did my human nature turn with loathing from my occupation, whilst, still urged on by an eagerness which perpetually increased, I brought my work near to a conclusion. In chapter 5, which I have been referring to at the very beginning of this video, he eventually succeeds in creating and reanimating this being. What happens to Victor when he realizes that he has created this being? Let me read the passage to you, as it is very vivid and will get you the best idea. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning, the rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull yellow eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. In that moment, Victor cannot really believe that this actually happened, and he actually succeeded in reanimating something, in resurrecting something from the dead. But the wild thing here is as well that it is not just one corpse that he is reanimating, but it's rather made up of several dead body parts. So it is an amalgamation of different beings and different human pieces that construct this being. And I think in this you also see how this scientific pursuit is so far away from the idea of a resurrection in the divine sense, and also from resurrection just in the idea of just resurrecting a human you know and you dearly love. And at this moment it is not love or another positive emotion that is driving his ambition, but rather just the narcissistic thought of being able to create this being and to be adored for this and to be the creator of a species. So he imagines himself as this powerful person who can eventually conquer death and bestow life upon lifeless matter. Of course, it's also a horrible thing to see for him and to experience. So very soon after, Victor abandons the creature. He says, I had worked hard for nearly 2 years for the sole purpose of infusing life into an inanimate body. For this I had deprived myself of rest and health. I had desired it with an ardor that far exceeded moderation. But now that I had finished, the beauty of the dream vanished, and breathless horror and disgust filled my heart. Unable to endure the aspect of the being I had created, I rushed out of the room and continued a long time traversing my bedchamber, unable to compose my mind to sleep. Victor leaves the house, and when he later returns with his friend Henry Clavell, he is relieved to see that the creature has left the apartment. He does not see the creature for a long time after, and he was so horrified by his own creation that he thinks it is better this way. But doom is just around the corner, as he learns pretty soon that his little brother William has been murdered. And the first thought that arises when he gets this information is that this must have been the act of the being that he created. in chapter 10, eventually Victor and the being that he created meet again. They meet in the mountains, and the monster, the being, the creation, the creature, demands that Victor listens to hear his story. And this is the first time that the creature itself speaks. We learn and hear about its story from its creation to the point when he meets Victor. And he accuses Victor immediately of not taking the responsibility for him and not caring, looking after him, although he created him. So he abandoned him immediately after the creation, so the monster was completely alone in the world and had to figure things out completely for itself. And throughout the next few chapters, you get an in-depth view of the monster's experiences and the way it was traveling and learning and even adopting French as a human language. And he learns about morals, about human life, about the way people live together, and many different things that really show his emotional depth and his intelligence, and also his pain, as he is very lonely. And here we have another biblical reference, as we also learn that the being has been reading Milton's Paradise Lost, which is a retelling of the Genesis story from the Bible. He's also been reading Plutarch's Lives and other works that he has been getting his hands on and he's been learning about. And then in chapter 10, he compares himself to Adam, which is quite interesting, as before you saw this comparison from Victor Frankenstein to God in a way, and here you see that he refers to himself as Adam when he says, "Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss, from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good, misery made me a fiend. Make me happy and I shall again be virtuous." So he is comparing himself to a fallen angel, and he should have been Adam, so he should have been this happy creation, that first being in the world that was looked after and cared for, and just the start of something new and something good. But instead he was this fallen angel, immediately abandoned and doomed, and also maybe even doomed to bring doom over others. Then when we learn more about the creature's experiences, we see how humane in many ways it is itself. And he is rejected by many people just because of its horrifying appearance, as it is made up of these different body parts and nothing seems to fit the other things, and it's just not like a human, really. Therefore, it is so lonely because nobody dares to speak to it. He tells how he has been observing a family called De Lacy and learns the language and human customs from them and yearns for companionship all the time. The arrival of Safi, who is a foreign woman, provides the creature with further education and insight into human relationships. And it also learns about the family's history, it learns about human injustice and prejudices, and becomes aware of its own origin and the depth of his isolation. There's another comparison to Adam when he says in chapter 15, "Like Adam, I was apparently united by no link to any other being in existence, but his state was far different from mine in every other respect. He had come forth from the hands of God, a perfect creature, happy and prosperous. Guarded by the especial care of his Creator, he was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature. But I was wretched, helpless and alone. Many times I considered Satan as the fitter emblem of my condition, for often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me." And this is also a very interesting connection, because before in chapter 10 he has been referring to himself as a fallen angel, and now he is referring to him as Satan, and Satan is a fallen angel. And therefore you see this connection and also this kind of fate in a way that he sees as his own, as he has been created and has been dealing with so much misery and so much isolation and abandonment and all these hardships, that there seems to be no other way for him than to turn bad. And we also learn that he has been killing William, the little brother of Victor, to punish him for leaving him, for abandoning him, and to express his feelings as well. But other than Victor, who just created this being and then didn't take up the responsibility, the creature demands a solution and suggests that he create a female monster, in a way, a female creature that is equal to him, that is also made up of dead body parts, and that can be a companion for him. The creature's longing for a connection, for an escape of his loneliness, is the driving force behind this suggestion. And he says in chapter 16, "I am alone and miserable. Man will not associate with me, but one as deformed and horrible as myself would not deny herself to me. My companion must be of the same species and have the same defects. This being you must create." And after initially refusing to create this being, Victor then agrees later on, also because he fears that the monster will otherwise kill other people of his loved ones, his surroundings. Victor then travels to England with the plan to create this female companion, but after he has already started, he completely destroys the creation, because he says he cannot do that once again. He cannot do the same bad thing a second time. And in this moment, he feels like he's doing the right thing, and he's not playing God a second time, if you will, but at the same time, he does not acknowledge the suffering of the being that he has already put into the world. His decision to destroy the female companion he has already started to create is mainly driven by fear. And here he fails to act ethically a second time. First, by lacking the responsibility for his own actions, and this time for lacking the responsibility for caring and looking after the being he created. And already here you can also see that both figures are really tragic in a way, because although Victor Frankenstein is responsible for his own doom in many ways, he also cannot escape this any longer after that, and there's no real way for him to find solace and to resolve this in a way that he can find peace with. As either he's creating the being and making the monster happy, or he's not creating it as he decides then. But this way he ignites the wrath of the monster even more. The monster is so lonesome and seeks revenge, as he already announces that he will kill everybody that Victor loves. Victor marries his cousin Elizabeth very soon after his decision not to create the female companion. But then everything ends in misery for him. His wife is killed, his father dies soon after by learning about this, and then he's completely alone and abandoned, as his good friend has also already been killed by the monster. In the end, the last few chapters, you see Victor is alone and abandoned himself, just like the monster. So the monster could hold up a mirror in a way in front of Victor, showing him what it feels like to be completely alone and misunderstood. And I wanted to look at the Promethean comparison that Mary Shelley draws in the subtitle of the novel, which she calls Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. This way, Mary Shelley does not only connect Victor to God, but also connect Victor to Prometheus, who brought the fire to the humans in ancient mythology. In the best known versions of the Prometheus story by Hesiod and Aeschylus, Prometheus merely brings the fire to humankind, but there's other versions, such as several of fables of Aesop and Sappho, and also in Ovid's Metamorphoses, where Prometheus is the actual creator of humanity. And here you can see the comparison again. The creation of humankind, of human beings, is a connection that Mary Shelley draws, but unlike Prometheus, who gave something to humanity, Victor just hoards his knowledge and acts alone for his own good in a way. He does not want to bestow life upon inanimate matter because he wants to do something good, but rather to feel like a king, like a god himself. So this is quite a harsh critique, I think, that Mary Shelley makes of her own protagonist in the novel. But there's a very interesting paper by Robert Kawashima, which is called The Modern God, Biblical Allusions in Mary Shelley Frankenstein from 2022, in which Kawashima argues that the allusions are not half as interesting and striking as the allusions to the Bible, especially because there's many. I just talked about a few of them. And he says that it should rather have been called The Modern God in the subtitle, but Prometheus was a figure that was very popular within Mary Shelley's circle, as her husband has been writing about Prometheus and others as well. And therefore, maybe she chose the subtitle. But looking at the biblical allusions is even more interesting. And Kawashima also says that the cumulative effect of these biblical allusions portray Victor Frankenstein as the villain of the novel very clearly, as the monstrous modern god, and his creature as the originally innocent victim. But in the story of Mary Shelley, the victim also becomes a murderer himself. And this is also a very interesting thing to see, how from this resurrection, to see what becomes of this resurrected being. And to conclude, I just want to look at whether Victor himself sees that he has made a mistake in the end of the novel, which I think he does not really. He says at the very end that it was good of him not to create the second being, although he might have really brought solitude to the monster, and also the monster had promised him to leave together with the female companion to a remote place where they would not disturb humanity in any kind anymore. But Victor did not believe him and was fearing this second act of creation. So in a way he justifies his decision in front of himself. And at the same time he does see that what he did was wrong, because in the very beginning, when he was meeting Robert Walton, the man who's narrating the tale through a letter to his sister, so he's narrating that in the beginning of the novel and the end, first telling how he meets Victor Frankenstein, in the end telling the story how Victor Frankenstein ends his story and also dies. And in the beginning he says that Victor told him, "I see by your eagerness and the wonder and hope which your eyes express, my friend, that you expect to be informed of the secret with which I am acquainted, the secret to reanimate dead bodies. That cannot be. Listen patiently until the end of my story, and you will easily perceive why I am reserved upon that subject. I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I then was, to your destruction and infallible misery. learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. So, in the end, as you can see, Victor acknowledges that what he did was dangerous and wrong, and therefore he does not tell Robert Walton about the secret that he figured out himself of how to revive and resurrect dead beings. So I think in the end the novel is not a warning about science, but rather about scientific ambition without accountability and responsibility. The novel raises many deep ethical questions. Who should create life and who should be responsible for whom, and what does the creation of life also, what kind of responsibility we also have when we create a being. What happens when those responsibilities are ignored, but it is also raising a lot of questions just about our humanity, how we interact with each other, how we accept each other, how we care for each other, how we look at each other, how we ignore each other sometimes. And so I think that is what the novel eventually makes most powerful. It is not just raising questions about what does resurrection of something dead mean, what does it mean to play God or to create life, but also what does it mean to live and to be in contact with other beings. Frankenstein and the monster both are deeply human and have to deal and struggle with so many human emotions, is giving the novel a lot of depth, and also seeing how big all of these themes and discussions are, that it is not any questions about anything of that are easily answered. But the way that Mary Shelley uses the allusions, especially the biblical allusions, is very insightful and very interesting, and I think one could go into so much more detail on that and just write an entire thesis about that, which has already been done, of course, but still, I think it's a very interesting theme, and I hope that this Easter will bring you a lot of happy times with your loved ones other than Frankenstein's monster, who was completely alone and abandoned and was deeply yearning for a companion. So let this be a reminder to reread Frankenstein or read it the first time if you haven't read it yet. It's a wonderful Gothic novel and one of the best I have ever read in the Gothic genre, and in general one of the best classics, I think. So if you're interested, give the novel a chance. If you liked this video and want to learn more about Mary Shelley, I will also link my video about the Ghost Story Challenge, which was how the idea to the novel Frankenstein came to life, as it was the summer of 1816, the year without a summer, where there were so many heavy rainfalls and it was very dark in summer and very cold. So Mary Shelley, Lord Byron, Percy Shelley and others were drawn to a house in Geneva where they were creating ghost stories, and they had this ghost story challenge. Everyone should tell a ghost story, and Mary Shelley was especially interested in the topic of Galvanism and of reviving the dead, and this is how Frankenstein was born, and it's the only story of all the stories that were created in that time that was eventually finished and became one of the greatest novels of our literary world. So here's the link to this video, and other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't yet. There will be more videos on Gothic literature, literary theory, medieval literature and classics in general in the future, and thank you for watching. See you, bye bye.